Hello, my friends. How are you? Let's have a cheer for democracy. There's nothing more democratic than a public library in a local election. I'm Janet Torsney. I'm the director of the Montclair Public Library. Very proud to be so. And we are really proud to be hosting the first All Candidates Forum with our friends Montclair Local. We think of the library as Montclair's front porch, you know, the place where people come to learn, to get the things they need, and that most important Montclair activity of all, talk about it. So today we'll be learning from our candidates. We have a comfortable format. We're just going to get to know each other. I just want to do a little library commercial, which is that we found the more we offer, the more people use their library, your library. We increased programs 50% last year, and our attendance increased 75%. So 25, I know. And 170,000 people came through the library doors last year. And that's 50% more than the year before, and not bad for a town of 40,000 people. So again, congratulate yourselves. And we appreciate the support of the mayor and the council for the library. They have known historically that for us to keep delivering these services and innovation and to maintain two very beloved but old buildings, we need additional funding. So this year our funding request is $430,000, and we hope that we'll get it so we can continue to do more for all of Montclair.
I'll vote for it.
Thank you, Bob. All right. And thank you. Oh, thank you. Not for me personally. So that's the end of the library commercial. We're back to the front porch. The first thing I want to do is introduce Liz George, who seems to be hiding at the moment. There she is. Liz, as you know, is the publisher of the Montclair Local. We're doing this together, and she's going to explain the rules of the road.
First of all, thank you so much for coming and being engaged in this process, and thank you to Janet and the whole staff of the library for helping us partner on this event and for being such an important part of our community. Just two little housekeeping things. There is a League of Women Voters Forum on April 25th. It's a Thursday. Want to make sure you're aware of that. And we plan to have one more partnership with Montclair Center Bid and the Upper Montclair Business Association to have another candidates night on Tuesday, April 30th. So just save the day for that. There'll be more information about that on our election hub at Montclair Local. And so today we're going to have the candidates come up. Janet's our moderator. Georgette Gilmore from Montclair Local will be keeping time. Thank you. We ask that everybody just be quiet so we can hear the timer go off, so we can make sure all the candidates get the same amount of time, have an adequate amount of time to respond. And again, we thank you so much for being here. Thanks.
So we're going to bring the candidates up by ward so you can hear them answer their questions together. And the first is our very own ward, the 3rd ward. So Roddy Moore and Wendy Tiburcio, would you come up, please? Thank you. The other 3rd ward candidate, Rahum Williams, was unable to join us today. And the format we're doing is the first question is kind of a get-to-know-you question for everyone. We want to see what's happening. The second is a more political question. So, Roddy, I'm going to start with you. First question. Are you ready?
Yes.
It's a tough one.
All right.
What's your favorite place in the 3rd ward?
Oh,
It is
favorite
tough,
place in the 3rd ward.
You have to say the library.
I gotta say the library, right? It's like, gotta say the library.
And Wendy gave you a tip,
Yeah,
right?
like give me the
That
tips,
was
right?
good.
But in all
Okay,
seriousness,
besides the library.
you know, I love Church Street.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a gimme. But you know, I love the library also. I mean, it's been such an instrumental part of my wife's upbringing. Like, she grew up here in Montclair, and the library was really central to her upbringing and helping her become such an avid reader that she is. today. And shout out to my mother-in-law. She's, she.
Where is she?
I'm not sure where she's at, but she made the library a priority in my wife's life, and it's really rubbed off on my kids, who both have a love of reading, partially developed by coming here as well. The library holds something special in my heart, for
Great,
sure.
thank you. How about you, Wendy?
The library.
The library.
Well,
Your second favorite.
wait, fun fact. My first job was as a library page when I was 14 years old. And actually the librarian, because I was there almost every day, she recruited me. I was 13 and she's like, as soon as you turn legal age in New Jersey, you will be working for us. And I love to read, so honestly, the library really holds a special place in my heart, and it's so great that we have this as a resource, as a beautiful resource in our community. My little one is 4, Aiden. He has his own little library card, and I was very excited when we got it. So that would be the first. Second one, I would say I am a huge supporter of small businesses, and I have many relationships with our small businesses around Church Street and all over Montclair. So I think they might come after me if I single out one. But I would say our shops and restaurants. I'm always saying shop local, support local. They're a great part of not just our local economy, but our community. Yeah. So you can always see me somewhere around the Third Ward, the Church Street area, supporting one of our businesses.
Great. Thank you very much. So our next question is, what does Montclair's diversity, what does that look like to you? And what, as a council member, would you do to maintain, expand, continue that?
Fantastic question. So one of the things, Janet, and everyone, that actually inspired me to run was the fact that I did notice that there's never been a Latina or a Hispanic person on the council, on the Montclair Council ever. And I would be, if elected, the first Latina. And with that, I certainly wanted to, again, create that more of diversity and inclusion. And also, I would love our council, even after this period, to even be open to more diversity and one day look like and represent more of the people in our community. So to me, that looks like people from all walks of life. I came from a low-income community. I was born in the Dominican Republic and grew up in Passaic. And from there, I, again, grew up there, low income, and eventually went to Montclair State University, which is where I fell in love with Montclair. Actually, I fell in love with Applegate Farms ice cream, toasted almond. It was actually so bad, my family had an intervention. I was eating it all the time. But I say that, again, I fell in love with such a charming town. Montclair State University itself is a Hispanic serving institution, which is fantastic, which means that a large percent of their students are of Hispanic heritage. And as they say, be the change you want to be. So I wanted to, again, throw my hat in the ring and also show my son, right, what diversity looks like, to go to places and see multiple groups represented, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, what walk of life, neurodiversity, different abilities. That's what I would love to see more of, represented in our spaces of influence and leadership. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Roddy?
Diversity to me is really important. I mean, it's of course, I married a Montclair girl, so that's what really attracted me to Montclair. But, when I learned more about the town, the diversity is something that really stood out to me and made me want to live here permanently and raise a family here. I think when you look at the historical diversity of the town, I look at that as primarily the Black community, and it was important for me to have a strong Black community with a church presence. And where I'm from, concentrations of Black people primarily are highly correlated with concentrations of poverty. Mm-hmm. And that was something that really stood out to me at Montclair, was very different. But I think the more I've been here, diversity is it's very broad, and one thing about the Third Ward that I love is got so much diversity. All kinds of diversity, from age diversity, income diversity. I mean, I think it's one of the most economically diverse wards in town. And I think it's important to maintain those things. When I look at the schools, right, how, where I'm from, neurodiverse kids are put off in an art hall somewhere. And here it's they're integrated with the other kids, and, they get to learn together and grow together. It's something that's super important to me.
Great. Thank you. Our first two candidates did a great job, right? And now it's time for the Fourth Ward candidates, Zina Floyd and Aminah Toler. Come on up. Come on up. Zina, we're going to start with you on the tough question. Tell us a fun fact about yourself that has nothing to do with elections. or electability even? It's hard, right?
I would say a fun fact about me is that I have a tendency to like to try different things and do different things, and I have a diaspora of interests. So I think that that would be it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Aminah?
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you all for being here tonight or this afternoon. Fun fact for me would be that I'm an avid baker. I'm a self-taught cake decorator. I do all kinds of cakes. I used to take the bus from Central Avenue up to JCPenney's to the Wilton Baking School, use my allowance money to buy baking products, and you name it, I can bake it today. That's a fun fact about me.
That's a good one, and promising, too. Right?
Absolutely.
Aminah, if you had to cut something in the budget right now, what would that be?
Are you talking about the township budget?
Yes.
Without really reviewing the full budget, if there was one area that would need to be cut, and I don't mean completely cut it, I would have to look at perhaps the Department of Public Works and see what can be worked out there. If there's something that could, shared services, if it could be a community-based type of agreement with residents. As far as recycling and trash, maybe we can get a community compost that might help save some money if we had something to that effect. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Zina, how about you?
So I'm not particularly into cutting budgets because that typically ends up salaries and people losing jobs. I think the best way to make that decision would be to look at our financial situation and what we're doing currently in all the areas of the township. Assess the finances and then make a determination in terms of if we'd even have to versus just dispersing it in another area. But I don't believe that I would be in support of cutting budgets without being able to really see the budgets and know what's going on. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Ward 4. You're concise. That's good. And now we're going to go to the first ward. So that's Erik D'Amato and Shivaun Gaines.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Erik, we're going to start with you. What was your first impression of Montclair?
Wow, that's a tough one. I used to come here in the 80s, the early 80s, because I had friends who went to the college. I'm from New Jersey. It was a fun place. That's you know, I came here, I played poker and danced. I mean, I you know, whatever. You know, it was fun.
How about you, Shivaun? What was your first impression?
I think the parks and the quiet.
A nice spectrum right there on that one. Shivaun, there is a house on the market now for $8.5 million, as you probably know. And the new median price for houses in Montclair is $1 million. So what would you do to address the affordable housing in Montclair?
Well, that would be extremely difficult in the real estate market nationwide. I think the township may want to offer alternatives and more opportunities. The rocket price of real estate, I think, is solely out of the hands of a township. It is a national phenomena that is happening, and more importantly, people are paying cash for the homes. So when that is the driver, those alternatives are slim to none.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. How about you, Erik?
So I'm a homeowner in the first ward, and like many homeowners in the first ward, I occasionally look at Zillow to see how rich I am. And I have noticed recently that if you look at that main basin from Watchung Avenue up to Mount Hebron Road, Valley Road in the west, to Grove Street, sometimes there are no houses for sale. Zero. There is zero inventory. And I've discovered that a lot of that is because there are people that just don't want to leave. Now, people don't want to leave for good reasons, partly. They want to stay. They love this place. They don't want to go to Florida. They want to stay. My block has as many 80-year-olds living alone as it does families with children. So for me, you can hate on me. I would like to see some building of senior housing. And I think that, now, you're not going to drive people out of the houses that they love, but as I'm turning, getting on the cusp of it, I don't want to live in a big house with a pool, and all this stuff. I would like to go somewhere like a townhouse with a clubhouse next to it and stuff like that. I mean, we need to build some housing and do it in a very, very deliberate and careful way. But I mean, I think that's a key thing. Otherwise, you're just like Shivaun said, it's a national phenomenon.
Great, thank you. And now from the second ward, Eileen, Birmingham, and Ilmar, Vanderer. Where are you? You get a library question. Eileen, you're first. What was your favorite book as a child, and what's your favorite book now?
That's a good question. I think my favorite book as a child was the very first book I learned to read by myself and knew how to read by myself. And that book was One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. Because I just remember having an immense feeling of pride and joy that I could understand the words, even though now when I go back and read that book, I have no idea what it means, but I could follow, and it was just a moment of joy for me that I still remember. As an adult, that's a really good question. I think there's so many books that I have enjoyed. I will mention one book where I was absolutely bawling at the end of it, Constellation of Vital Phenomena, about the war in Chechnya. And there are very few times in life when I literally will close a book and just be in tears, and that was one of those books. So I would say that's one of my favorites.
That's a range, thank you. How about you, Ilmar?
Well, that is such a sentimental question for me because I learned to read at the Bellevue Avenue Branch Library building. My mom brought my sister and I there when we were 5 years old, and she got us into books and into reading. And similarly to Eileen's answer, one of my favorite, most cherished childhood books was The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. And it still is, because its message has not changed or dated with the years. I also liked novels. I got into them at a very early age. When I was 10 years old, I believe, I read Dracula, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and The Phantom of the Opera. I love those tales of mystery and monsters, and I still do to this day. I can't pinpoint any particular, I would say those novels actually remain my favorites to this day, and I love biographies especially. Any new biography of a person. Recently I started reading Olympia Dukakis' biography that she released a couple years ago before she passed away, and that is definitely a fascinating book, and it's someone who lived in Montclair for many, many years, so that would be what I would be into.
Speaking of fun facts, biographies are really down in libraries. People are not interested in them anymore. So I'm glad you're the exception.
I find them fascinating.
Yeah, no, I do too. So on the other side, Ilmar, you're first. Montclair is currently involved in a dozen lawsuits.
Yes.
What changes would you recommend to change how the township handles legal matters, if you think that needs to be changed?
Well, definitely, I do. It's unacceptable. We have, I think, an all-time high record number of lawsuits against the township, and some for very valid reasons, I believe, and some directed against specific people and individuals, and some based on the direct actions and decisions of certain people on the current council and in the town government. So obviously, change is necessary. And fortunately, most all of the current council members have taken themselves out of the running for this election. However, there are not all, as I said, most, and there are, unfortunately, though, people at 205 Claremont who are entwined in some of those legal matters, and I would absolutely be open to any and all necessary personnel changes that would disentangle the township as soon as possible from those lawsuits, whether that involves changing out the township manager, changing out the township attorney, changing out other staff and personnel within the purview of the council's control. I would do everything possible immediately to address that, because I think that's one of the most urgent issues facing the next council, quite frankly, and the future of our entire town is tied up in those lawsuits.
Thank you. How about you, Eileen?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Ilmar's point, and I will agree, I applaud your answer there, Ilmar. I think we do have an urgent need to really figure out what is going on and what is the root cause of a lot of these lawsuits. I think we have seen there are several related to workplace, either discriminatory promotional practices, inappropriate behavior among employees. And I think these are really important issues that we need to address and figure out. And to the point of, if it does require personnel changes, I think we have to, in the capacity of the council, in terms of the council hires the town manager, the town attorney. These are things that I think the council will really have to address in the next the next council will really have to address that pretty urgently. Because, I think it's unacceptable. I think the other point is transparency to community, community engagement. I think there are best practices around community engagement that we do not follow here in this town. I think you can see, for example, Princeton is a good example of a town that has a lot of practice around community engagement that we could very easily learn from at fairly low cost. And I think these are things that we should really look at, again, because I think lack of transparency has also led to frustration, which then leads to lawsuits when people are sort of feeling like they're unheard and not being, or things that are sort of, wondering if things are illegal, forcing them to file lawsuits. I think we really need to move away from that.
Great, thank
And
you.
I agree with you on that latter point.
Great, thank you very much. The next group is the at-large candidates. So that's Carmel Loughman, Robert J. Russo, and Susan Shin Anderson. Well, it's on already. It should be on. Ready? Carmel, you're going to go first.
Is this on?
Yes. What is the worst kept secret in Montclair?
The worst kept secret in Montclair. I think we're all very chatty. There aren't all that many secrets. And if you want to know secrets, you got to get on Facebook, which I am not a big fan of, but I've been trying to get on it. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in secret Montclair. The biggest secret in Montclair, all the restaurants are reviewed, all the civic things are known. I think we're really out there.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a secret. Maybe my colleagues just...
How about you, Bob? What do you think?
There are no secrets in Montclair.
All right. Susan, do you think there's any secret?
I didn't finish.
Oh, sorry. Okay. That was so definitive, Bob.
I'm used to being cut off.
Oh.
What I have is my poem here I wrote 30 years ago, which is why I have this in my hand about running, because the secret here is that I'm a runner, and I've been doing that for years. A lot of people don't know that. So the Essex Running Club is my passion. I can't run as much as I used to now at 75, but what Montclair people don't know about a lot of their public officials is the secret. And I think they should get to know people better, and should get to know the people they're going to elect. I'm so happy to see a whole new group of council members will join me in a couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Susan? What's
Worst kept secret.
the worst kept secret,
Well,
if there is one?
I think I kind of agree with Carmel that there isn't that much that secret, but the worst kept secret, I have to say, is I think the the perception out there that's been going out in the past couple of years, that there's a lot of dysfunction in the town leadership and council and management. I think, unfortunately, you know, it's unfortunate that that is out in the press and to the wider public. And it's just, for me, it's disappointing because I love this town. I really care about this town. I think we all do. Everybody in this room wants to see this town move forward in a productive and positive way. So I'm sorry if that sounds a little negative, but I'm hoping to be part of a new leadership that can sort of turn that around and sort of, you know, get rid of the toxicity, get rid of some of the dysfunction that's been going on at 205 Claremont, and really move the town in a great way, and I think we can.
Great, thank you. Bob, does Montclair have a parking problem? If yes, how would you feel?
I've been on the council for 24 years, but it was a split in my service. So I did 12 years and one term as mayor, most of you may know. I promised my wife I would never do it again, and then I got to come back 8 years later after a break, and the problems were still there, the same problems, mostly parking problems, high taxes, and the lack of actually diversity in the government. What I feel is that the parking problem can only be solved if we build perhaps better decking. I mean, it has to be that the land we have that can be used as a deck. Let's say, for example, in the First Ward area, where I was councilman originally, we tried to put a deck in the area where the condo that I had lived in and my mother lived in for 30 years, the Bel Air house, tried to put a deck back there where the bank and the Bellevue shopping area is. Nobody wanted to see that. Nobody wanted to see us go up. But where were we going to put it? And that would have relieved the problem in that area when I was up in that area as council representative. When I was mayor, we did do a new deck. The Crescent deck is a good deck, actually. And that's the kind of model for a deck that I think we need. Now we have 2 more decks that have gone up. Problems with parking have existed for years, and I think the problem with the meters is really what people have been complaining about. They don't seem to work right. The technology is not good. So we have a parking problem. We've got to solve it with more parking facilities and with better use, and maybe we're going to have to change these meters that we bought. I think you might remember we bought them. Mayor Jackson made a decision we would spend $750,000 to retrofit them, and we had to do it. They were just breaking down. 50% of the meters were not working. So we did something. We invested, but technology is way ahead of us. So we need to do something to address that. But parking is still the problem, as I seek maybe one more term to help out with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Carmel?
Well, I'm a person who likes to do research and look at the data associated with a question. So with respect to parking, I actually did a little research on this, talking to the bid director, Jason Gleason. And myself and Roddy both met with him, and the data that he has is that most of our parking decks are not full. They're like a 35% usage of, for example, the new deck on Glenridge Avenue. And what the problem is that the parking meters are not priced right. They're priced lower than the deck. So if the solution could be increasing the price of parking at the meters to drive people to the deck. Mm-hmm. That's one solution. I agree that many times the meters are broken, and that certainly is a problem. What's else with parking? Yeah, and the other thing, which you'll probably see soon, is that basically what the data shows is that most restaurants are within 1 block of a parking spot. That people just don't like to walk. They want to be right in front of the restaurant that they're going to. So I would research this question a little bit more before we start building huge decks. And as a matter of fact, as a woman, I hate to go into one of these decks, so I can understand why people want to park on the street. That they're dark, they're dirty, they're ill-lit. And to me, they can be more expensive. Actually, I'm lucky because I can walk to Central Montclair, which is a great thing. Anyway, so that's my...
Great, thank you. How about, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I also had a conversation with somebody from the Montclair Center BID because I was wondering if there's a scarcity of parking, because I think that's sometimes there's some kind of perception that there is. And I myself live on Forest Street, where that new parking deck is, and most of the time when I walk by there are literally hundreds of parking spots available. So I don't want to make any declarations that we need to build more parking decks if the ones that we have now are underutilized for any reason. The other thing that I have been hearing from some residents, as I'm in the past couple of months, is looking at the issue of there's some homeowners or renters who live on, residential street. I mean, I moved here from New York City, and I was just happy that we didn't have to move our car every day. But coming here, the whole concept of no parking overnight. That was a new concept for me. And so what I've been hearing from some people who live on these streets is, frustration that it's an additional cost. They'll have to, they have to pay for parking permits on top of paying a mortgage or, their rent. So I'm just interested in exploring some, ways that we can help with that situation. And sort of having a little bit more discussion about that.
Great, thank you.
Can I add one more point?
I think you can.
Just because I think the town in general seems to underutilize technology. You should be able to drive into Montclair and see a sign that would show you, here's where the parking lot is, here's how many spaces are available, so that you're not, driving around in residential areas with your pollution and your, noise, annoying people and taking their spots, so you'll know where to go. And I don't think that we have enough signage that shows us available parking, and that would be a real helpful thing.
Bob, do you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Susan, I'll let you too.
Just to add on to this, one of the real solutions is to use less cars. So we need to do biking and walking and get off the car attachment, because that's really what congests everything. So we've really got to shift our whole perspective, and I've seen this over many years. But again, I don't want to see decks built, and we really have enough now. But the problem is getting people to use what's there, because people complain about not being able to park and then they leave, but we've got to make the meters more user-friendly, and we've got to give people more hours to stay. You can't, within 1 or 2 hours, if you're stuck at a meter like that with a limit, you're not going to be able to see the movie and go to eat and walk around the center of town in that limited time. So I get very frustrated, my wife and I, with the limits on the meters. So we've got to do a lot of technology to change things.
Susan, do you want to add anything? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finally, our mayoral candidates, Dr. Renee Baskerville and Christina M. Thomas. Welcome. Renee, we're going to start with you on the get to know question. What is your favorite Montclair rumor?
Wow. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm really not one that tends to listen to the rumor mill, so I think that question is pretty much asked to the wrong person. I try very hard to avoid the rumor mill and whatever that is, to the extent that at this point in time I'm not going on Facebook to find out whatever the latest things are that people are doing, and I don't really know. I ignore those types of things. I celebrate Montclair for the goodness that I see in most of the people. I celebrate Montclair because most of the people that I know are not interested in rumor mill. They're more interested in the positive things that we represent. They're more interested in being out in the street fighting for the just causes that many of us believe in. They're very interested in coming together around the commonalities, more so than listening to a rumor mill. So I can't really add a lot to that particular question, but there I stand.
Christina?
All right. Well, I am not a social media person either. I I have an AOL account for any of you that know, so don't hold that against me. But I love a good rumor. And I can tell you that one of the rumors that I heard, because I didn't know everybody that was running and I wanted to go out and meet every single person. And this guy, Rahum, came out of nowhere. And who is he? And oh my gosh, did you hear that he's related to Terry? And I was like, blood relative? Yeah, blood relative. So I had lunch with him. And I was like, so what's your relationship to Roger Terry? And he was like, who? So we joke about like how fast rumors spread through Montclair and how secret Montclair is not secret and how everything is. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's really easy to dispel them by just talking to your neighbors. That's why things like Secret Montclair are so great, because they're like, hey, this is the rumor. And somebody says, no, this is the fact. So I told Rahum to watch out, because there's a rumor going around that he's Barack Obama's, what was he? He was his cousin. So if you hear that, you're welcome.
He didn't show tonight. He's not here.
So, Christina, you're first for this. We want to know, what is your number one priority as mayor? What's that going to look like on the 100th day? And what's that going to look like at the end of your term?
Okay. So I go to all of the town council meetings, and I've been doing it for years. And the number one problem that we have is perception of shadiness. And I think that transparency and abiding the rules and the law will resolve so much of that. And the rest of it will be resolved by actually inviting community involvement from the beginning all the way through. So people aren't presented with a plan and they say, oh, well, everything's fixed. But you can't see it. It's not done, but it's fixed. And you should love it, because it was done in a back room somewhere. And when you know the rules and you know the law and you understand how government is supposed to work, you get really, really frustrated when you hear the lawyer say, you can't do that. We're like, yes, you can. You can't speak when people, you can't cheer, you can't talk. Yes, you can. It's your First Amendment right. We are going to limit the time that you can be heard. Well, why? Why don't you want to hear what the people have to say? I think that the tone of the whole group will change, because everyone that we know, every person running gets along. We know each other. We've taken the time to meet each other. We respect each other. And we're all willing to earn the respect of the community, because right now the community feels unheard and is, basically yelling like the Lorax, I speak for the trees. We shouldn't all have to feel that way. We should feel like, yay, we did this together. And we are, again, the example of what every town in New Jersey wants to be. Not just in New Jersey, but everywhere. We're awesome. So.
Renee, how about you? What's your number one priority? What will it look on day 100 and at the end of your term?
The number one priority for me will be to immediately get my transition team in and begin to work with them to look at the entire township and all the things that we're going to do. We have some world-class people that I've been talking to that are very interested in becoming a part of the transition team. I'm excited about that. We'll do this along with the team that is elected. And the team that is elected is going to spend immediate time talking about communication. Of all the things that I've seen in the past 3 years, and I was elected for 12 years and very involved, and then I had a 3.5 going on 4-year hiatus. And during that time, I had a wonderful opportunity to sit back and observe and find out what's working and what's not working. And time and again, I realized that so many of the problems, including perhaps some of the lawsuits, were centered around communication, lack of communication types of things. So for me, that's important. I'd like to see that the elected officials go off and have a retreat. I don't even know if they do that anymore. We used to do that at one time. It was very helpful. Because during that time, what you do is you talk about appropriate ways to communicate, and you talk about the ways that you'll definitely not communicate. You'll talk about the fact that you will never have an incendiary comment to make about someone. You'll talk about the fact that you will never deliberately harm someone, hurt somebody's feelings, or put them down. You'll talk about the fact that through listening more to one another, we can come to places that, while we may not agree, we certainly don't have to be disagreeable. And so we'll go through a process. And it's important that you agree as a council to do that at the beginning. Because what I noticed was that if one council person decides that it's okay to give remarks that are less than positive, that are not uplifting to the community, then others begin to follow suit and they begin to do the same thing. And so for me, communication would definitely have to be a part of that. I'd like to come back and look at the communication internally as well. I think we're doing some great things now, but I think we've all seen demonstrated an amazing PR campaign for the township, and I'd like to continue along those lines. So I think that we can do a lot more with that. And so, yeah, for number one, number two, and in the future, when you go down year three, year four, when people come into the council, what you'll see is people that are not afraid to get up and speak their mind and say what they have to say in a respectful manner, because they know the people that are sitting there are going to respond in a respectful manner. And I think that that's going to be important, because some people decided not to run, not because they wouldn't be amazing sitting in these positions, but because they believe, from what they've seen, that this is what democracy looks like. No, I'd like to tell you it does not, and I'd like to bring back something different.
Thank you both very much. Now we have time for questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Can we get out the
You're free. I'm going to actually give your microphone to Liz.
Who's got a question? I see somebody down.
Thank you all very much. I realized I didn't say that this is going to, TV 34, as you can see, is filming this, and it should be posted on Tuesday, we're hoping, and it'll be run several times. Any questions?
Yes.
Where is Liz?
Thank you. My name's Gail Abramowitz, and I've lived here for about 30 years, and I have not heard anybody talk about public transportation in this community. We are attached to our cars, which I am as well, but I think we need to think about the future. Yes, walking, bicycles, but some of us can't do it that well, and as we get older, we're going to do it less. What about public transportation?
Right. Thank you. Who would anybody who wants to respond, come up. Just, you can come here and use this mic. No, Carmel, come here and use this mic, then you can all. Anybody who wants to respond, just
I love the question. Is this on? Yeah. Oh, I love the question about public transportation, because it's surely lacking in Montclair. And I'm just going to give an example. So one of the things that's talked about at the Lackawanna redevelopment plan is that we need a supermarket there, right? That there's a dire need because there's a what's it called? A food desert. And I personally don't believe that a supermarket in Lackawanna Plaza is going to solve any food desert that exists in the south end of Montclair. It's all good. Oh, I'm not opposed to a supermarket. I'm just saying the problem in the south end of Montclair is that people don't have cars and there's no mass transit to get them anywhere. So those are the most economically disadvantaged areas, and I think that if we had some kind of transportation that could get these people, not just senior citizens, people with families who need to shop and buy large quantities of food, they have to take an Uber, they have to take a taxi, they just can't get there. And having a supermarket at Lackawanna Plaza is not going to solve that issue. Having a jitney bus that might go around the whole town would be a wonderful thing to have. So what else about, I don't know. And I wonder what's going to go on with our 66 bus. You know, to me, I look at DeCamp and I see that property that they have that's right near an active railroad station. And I say to myself, are they going to keep doing this bus to New York? I say no, they're going to sell that property and want to develop it. So are we ever going to get a bus back to New York? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Anybody else?
So I know a lot of you don't know this, but I actually ran with Renee 4 years ago, and people are like, "Oh, who ran?" Well, I was on that. But one of the things that I did was I learned a lot. And one of the other things I did was design a jitney system that would run from Montclair State all the way to the 4th Ward and run around on Valley Road and do the main streets. And I hoped that it could be kind of like a trolley, but kids could get on, adults could get on, people that can't necessarily walk. I had a mom that I took care of that was in a wheelchair and she couldn't go far. We always had to have the ability to get her out of the car and get her into the doctor's offices, and it was a big deal. I don't know if any of you were at the 4th Ward meeting where Pat Hurt was like, well, I used to love to come down to the restaurants, but if there's no parking, I'm not going. Because you do need to park kind of close by. And I, like Carmel, I think, said, I don't really feel comfortable in the parking decks. Some of them are a little scary and they're far away. So what we need to do is address the parking situation in a way that doesn't say, well, we don't need more parking spots way over there because they're empty all the time. Well, they're full on the nights when we have an event at the Wellmont, but people should be paying more to park at the meters. That's fine. But I don't imagine that Bob is going to get up on a bike and start riding around. I think that we might need some kind of transportation system like they have and like they used to have. The Glen Ridge bus used to come around and take older people to activities. We need to have more destinations that are regularly traveled and something that's always available to people that are too young to Uber, like my daughter who's 12, and too old to want to drive anywhere, but want to enjoy all of the places that are here in Montclair, because it's a great place to be.
Thank you for your question. I think, well, for me, public transportation is an equity issue, and so, as well as an environmental issue. And my opinion is, before we when we're looking at potential public transportation options, I think we really need to look at it from the larger perspective in terms of road design. If we do, have buses, town buses or jitneys, are our roads going to be able to, and is our traffic going to be able to handle that? I would love to see a jitney service. I actually put that as part of my response in the Montclair local question about Vision Zero. I often have wondered in the past, since I moved here, basically, why we don't have at least a jitney bus service that services the entire town, that goes to all the train stations like Glen Ridge does, like other towns like Maplewood, I believe, does. So I would love to explore that as a possibility, and see if we could get, work with the county or get some sort of funding through the state. So those are just some of the ideas off the top of my head. I think that one might be, maybe could be within reach. And so, yeah, I would love to continue the conversations about that.
I'm glad I can segue into that because many years ago we had the bus provided by federal government funding through Congressman Pascrell, and we had a big fanfare that was going to be a senior bus, and they would pay for the first year completely. Then as we went on, each year would come down 1/3 less. By the 3rd or 4th year, the town council didn't want to do it anymore. Being that I'm the oldest member of the council, I'm concerned about seniors having that, so I'm agreeing with you, but we did do it. We had it in the past. Renee knows what we used to do, but we've got to get back to that again. We've got to get federal money to help us with the purchase, not only purchase of a jitney service, but then you have to maintain it. So the problem with the grants was always, and my students study this at Montclair State, the descending grants. They give you all the money in the beginning, and then they give you less and less each year. So you've got to make the investment as a town then after that to keep it going. But that's a very good alternative. All the towns around us have it. We have to invest in that. There is a proposal right now with our senior citizen leadership to have a jitney for seniors, but it really can go beyond that. Working at Montclair State, I know that the president wants to do something where the buses that Montclair State has are used to bring students down all around town. And then they could be used to help with senior transportation and with general transportation for shoppers and people who want to visit downtown restaurants and the theater. So we could use a connection between Montclair State, where I've worked for many years, and the community and the town government. But it hasn't happened the last 4 years. What's happened the last 4 years is a deterioration in the relationship between the university and the government, and a deterioration in the relationship between senior citizen leadership and the local government. And I've been trying, as you know, to fight to get things done, but I can't get them done without a good council. So get a good new council and let me keep working on this. Thank you.
So I certainly agree with the jitney perspective, and actually I was researching that a lot. But something else that I want to add, and Renee touched a little bit on this, and I'm so glad she did, is communications. My career is in communications and marketing, and what I've noticed in my 12 and a half years in Montclair, there are many things that, in resources that we have, good things, but if no one knows about them, what good are they? Right? So we need a comprehensive communication strategy, comprehensive communications campaign. For example, I learned from a friend that I believe it's the bicycle shop downtown, Diamond Cycle, right? They rent out bikes. If I ask most people on the streets, they don't know that. So the resources that we have, we need to do a better job as a town of actually telling the residents that it's there. We need to do a comprehensive year-round campaign. I think we do a great job around large events like the Jazz Fest and Pride, which I'm there all the time. I love them, and we encourage people to walk. But we need to do more outside of events. We need to not just do events, but do a journey. There's no reason why that can't be a year-round campaign. And even incentivize some people. Hey, you walk downtown, why not collaborate with the businesses? Can you give them 20% off or something like that because you walk downtown? I live on Gates. I think that would incentivize me a little bit. Okay, let me put on my sneakers and actually walk for once. So again, comprehensive communications, comprehensive marketing strategies around the resources that we have are very important. And with that, I will say #walk downtown.
Hi. I want to just say I agree that public transportation should be of paramount importance in this town. And it seems like a jitney we're a perfect town for a jitney. I think we have several train stations. I think we should have jitneys to train stations like West Orange does, like Glen Ridge does. I think we really need to stop talking about how we want a jitney and actually go for getting a jitney. And I will just give an example of a town, and I know I mentioned Princeton, but and Princeton's not really the exact model for us because they have a lot more commercial ratables, and they also have the university that provides a lot of financial support. But just recently, for example, Princeton got grants from the state for 2 electric jitneys worth $177,000, and they're paying about $60,000 for 2 electric jitneys. That meets several of our goals that we talk about in the community in terms of trying to be sustainable environmentally. Keeping cars off the roads, fewer cars off the roads is part of safe streets, is keeping streets safer. And so we sort of have to ask ourselves, why did Princeton get that grant and Montclair did not get that grant? And these are the kind of things that we need to talk about. Maplewood just got from the community development grant, they got a senior transit. And there's money out there, and we need to really be strategic and take advantage, because if we want a jitney, there's no reason a town like Montclair should not have a jitney, except for will and getting it done.
So I would add my voice to the support for the jitney, although having spent a lot of time living in Europe, I would vote for a tram instead, just on aesthetic grounds, but I'll settle for the jitney. I do think that the next council actually will have choices that will be more profound than whether we have a jitney in terms of public transport. Because coming down the road fast, pun intended, will be enormous changes in transport, not just public transport, but in general. And there are two things that will implicate this town hugely in that. One is, this town exists as a commuter town. Go to one of the parking lots by the train stations on a weekday now, on a Friday, and look at it. We are seeing a profound change in the way transit is being used. Now, that I don't want that to sound scary, but it means something is happening, and the people who are on the council are going to need to look down that road and try to figure out what it means for the town. The second is, and I'm really glad my wife is not here to hear this, because she hears it every night at the dinner table and would just be beating me. By the end of this next council, you will see cars on the road without drivers. You will see that. That's a fact. And that also may seem a little scary, but it is not. It should not be. And we can leverage that coming revolution to the benefit of this town. That means not huge SUVs crowding the roads. It means people taking a little micro vehicle into town. Crucially, it means that our growing number of seniors who are having their keys taken away from them, like it'll happen to me, it'll happen to all of us, will be able to be free in ways that they're not free now. So that's not going to happen immediately, but it literally could happen in the next council. And if we're on the ball and paying attention, we can be a town that seizes that opportunities in ways that other towns, like Princeton even, look at us and go, hell with them, those smart asses. That's what I'd like to see.
Okay, very, very short. After listening to this and agreeing with so much it was said, I was not going to stand up, and then it occurred to me that moving forward, because we do have such a vibrant population of seniors, and they're very active, the lifelong communities, the Dewdrop Inn, the Aging in Montclair, that before I decided to do anything, I would go and convene those groups of individuals that have been meeting and know exactly what they believe is going to be in their best interest, rather than decide for them what they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Any other questions? Liz is the microphone woman.
Hi. So much of what the council does...
Say your name and your...
Oh, I'm Saul Hansel. I've lived here for a couple decades. So much what the council does ultimately is involved in the budget and the money, and I would love to hear from the mayoral candidates and anybody else, what is the single biggest thing that you think should be cut from what the town's spending? Where is the single biggest thing that you would want to add? And does that net out to a raise or a decrease in taxes at all?
Sorry about that. It's hot in here. Have you noticed that? Kenny's going to open the windows. If anybody wants to open the windows, if they're next, is that okay, Kenny? If people open them, or would you rather do it yourself? It's okay.
Okay, so the Montclair budget isn't actually done for 2024 right now. That's the way the budget process works here. We're halfway through our year before they vote on the budget. It's not really an efficient way to do things. And, one of the things that I learned somewhere, I thought it was in 5th grade, but I guess it was reinforced when I got my MBA and my Master's in Public Policy, is accounting is important, and keeping track of what we spend is important, and living within our budgets is important. I also learned that as a mom, and who, pays really, really high taxes. So I can't afford to have my taxes raised. We pay some of the highest taxes in the nation, and we do not spend our money wisely. And that's one of the reasons that I am actually running. I saw the council get up and vote on a contract that they admitted that they hadn't read for $20,000 more than they were allowed to. And even when David Cummings asked, did anybody get the contract and read it? And he made a motion to table it just until everybody could read it. They said no, and then they approved it anyway. That's why I'm up here, because I can read and I can count. And I don't think that we need to, like, yes, we spend our money differently than other towns do. And we have, if you look at the public safety budget and this budget and that budget, it's way high. The thing is, we have so much money in the budget. It's not a matter of finding it. It's a matter of actually using the grants that we had. We had a anti-hate grant from the state government for $200,000 and $300,000, I'm sorry. And the police officers that were in charge of it were not even asked about it. They said, we got it. The Aubrey group got it for us, and then they didn't do the budget that got approved. So when someone asked the town council about it, they said, what are you talking about now? I think I'll look into it. That kind of thing, waiting for 3 years, is completely unacceptable. And you can't blame it on, oh, well, I'm new, I didn't know, we just hired this guy, we just fired that guy. The government is a continuous thing. All of the council is supposed to be able to move on simply, fast, get the job done. Mr. Jackson was able to get us a AAA bond rating. That means a lot. That means we can borrow money for a lot less than we did before, and it gives us credibility. However, if we don't spend our money well, then we lose it. We are right now on the risk of losing it. So what do I want to cut? We'll look at it, but there's money to be spent, and taxes will not be raised.
Yeah. So to just answer that right away without having had an opportunity to sit down and uncover everything in the budget would be very difficult. Part of what we do as a council, and in particular the finance committee, is sit down and go through every item and try to make sure that we are providing the most efficient way of providing the services that we need. In addition to that, when I become mayor, I'm going to make sure that everything's done in a transparent way so that you and other people will know exactly how, and it'll be a participatory governance so that the residents in the community who are creating the tax base for us will have input to that before we go into the back room and present something to you. And so for me to stand here, I can't possibly tell you at this moment, but I think it's very important, and I believe that having the right people in there that understand that it's going to be a valued-centered budget, and that's going to come from the input of the entire community.
The budget transparency process is a big issue for me. I think part of that, and I think I understand your question, is I believe that one of the first things, first of all, I think what would really be helpful or could be helpful is if the next council were to be able to, whoever's seated there, were to be able to develop a strategy of what exactly the council and the town is going to prioritize. And that could sort of help drive, what departments, where we could look at potential cuts. What are we going to really prioritize spending our money on? And then the other thing is, I would really love to see a comprehensive review on an HR, like a full HR review. Without having delved into a lot of it, I know a lot of people in town have done a little bit more and has done a lot of research. From the little that I can see, and in some of the hiring decisions and positions that have been filled, I having been a manager, I work for a large institution. I would really love to see a full review. Maybe it would require a consultant of, the personnel that we have, who, I've asked for, a pretty comprehensive org chart just to see who is working in each department, what are their positions, what are their responsibilities, what are our present needs, like what are the current needs of this town, right? To be able to, what do we need in terms of personnel to be able to carry the work forward? And taking a look at, what's the situation with managers? Are they actually managing their staff efficiently and properly? Things like that. So I think doing that, it seems like it could help a lot with, finding some potential cost savings in the budget. So that's just off the top of mind. That's what I've been thinking about in the past month and a half or so. So after doing some research. Thanks.
I'm glad that question was asked. So if I understand the question, it's about cost decreases or increases as they relate to taxes going up or down. And that's very difficult because, you can cut some services or you can add, let's say, 5% to the library's budget, but that necessarily is not going to make anyone's taxes go up or down by in and of itself, because there's so many other cost factors that factor into it. You asked what would we cut and what would we embellish, and I will say immediately, whoever gets elected to the next council is going to face a big budgetary challenge, because we have what I call core frontline infrastructure, physical infrastructure in this town that's deteriorating by the minute. Janet just mentioned the needs of the library. We have 205 Claremont that's crumbling. We have the police department headquarters that's crumbling. We visited Clary Anderson Arena a week ago that's disintegrating by the minute. And the can, this is not the fault of the current council, that can has been kicked down the road for too many years. And it is now, unfortunately, to the point of no return, where the current council has to act and make this difficult capital funding request decisions. I am in favor of money for all of the above that I mentioned. Where I would make cuts, and this is especially true after spending 3 hours with our current township manager, Mike LaPola, last week carefully reviewing the state of the township, I believe, and I will be very blunt about it, we have a bloated bureaucracy at 205 Claremont Avenue. And there are people whose tasks, after looking at job descriptions, are redundant, vague, opaque, at best, to be kind, and that is someplace where I would make the first cuts before I ever cut a dime of the library's money or put aside money to save our core physical infrastructure, which is central to our community as a town. That's what I would do.
I guess I'm at a disadvantage here because while Ilmar is my teammate, he just stole all my thunder there. I'm a finance person. I have an MBA in finance from NYU. I enjoy looking at budgets and numbers. I looked at the town budget. We have a $100 million municipal budget. We have a $137 million school budget. That's a lot of money. Within the town budget, about 60% of the costs in the budget are personnel. Just like Ilmar was saying, that is probably the area we need to look at if there's any possibility of reduction in costs there. We have to take a deep dive into that. And like Ilmar, I also got the information about job descriptions and salaries per employee, because that's what I'm interested in looking at. But what I also know, and Ilmar said this too, is that we have dire need for investment in our capital assets. Clary Anderson Arena, 205 Claremont Avenue, the fire station at Nishawane, and maybe importantly to me is the stormwater infrastructure in town. We keep hearing about flooding. People's homes are flooded. The Tony's Brook, the banks are not maintained. The water just, it just floods. And if you look at, as I did, a stormwater map, the epicenter of our problem with flooding and stormwater management is right in the center of town. And I think we saw that when we had a major hurricane where, it just flooded the basements, the parking lots flooded. So it's hard to talk about cuts when you have all this need for capital investment that has been deferred far too long. So what can I say? I think we have to balance what our future needs will be to maintain the assets that we have with the potential for shaking out some money, possibly from the administration. But I do note that most of the people in 205 Claremont Avenue are union folks, and our contracts with the police and fire and other unions are coming up. Some will be coming up during the term of this next new council. So that's something, we're going to have to deal with.
I have not served on a council or anything like that and made decisions in this area, but I have spent a lot of my life dealing with countries as a reporter and a consultant that have hit the wall financially and have lived in some when it happened. And so it's always top of mind that places should get ahead of their problems and not be overcome with them. And I do think that Montclair does need to think about some of these looming issues that we have financially in those terms. We will have unfunded liabilities and other kinds of things accumulating on the books that don't show up in our normal bonded debt, which is about $60 million, about $1,500 per person. There are other things that are there. So it is a serious situation. Even if you continue on the glide path that you're on, the costs go up. The costs go up, and then the debt, as it were, of the infrastructure degrading goes up. It's not great. The job of the council should be first and foremost to tell the truth to people. And to dispel, thank you, Renee, to dispel misconceptions that can be very easy to come by, that I've had myself. One of them is that people think that we spend a lot of the money on schools, that we have an expensive school district. And actually, compared to a lot of places, we don't. There's a technical term for what we have in our town. It's called municipal overburden. That's in the law. It means a municipality that spends proportionately too much money. Schools, $22,000 a kid or whatever it is. So we have to face the fact that our township government is expensive. It's expensive. We also have to face the fact that we're not going to be bailed out by other people. We have a per capita median household income of about $150,000 in this town, $250 in my ward, roughly. That's a lot. That's twice the American average for the town as a whole, and God knows what for Spiffy Ward 1. So, yes, there are grants that we can get, but we cannot wake up in the morning being like, there's a grant coming to us. It'd be like Sweden saying that, going to the World Bank, bail us out. No. So we just have to do better with what we have and be very, very smart. Now, the other misconception, so first of all, it is true, as others have said, that if you look at the budget, let's say we're dying a death by 1,000 cuts in the budget. A lot of stuff. There are a lot of individual budget lines that are either goofy or obviously overfunded or whatnot. There are not any big, obvious kills or whatever you would say. I would say, however, that I was very surprised when I moved here, along with everybody being sports mad. I thought it was interesting that we have such a large public safety apparatus. Now, I have no problem with the police. I was the victim of a gun crime twice before I could kiss a girl. But, oh, I'm sorry, Liz. But we should recognize that.
Thank you. My recommendation, if elected, to the new mayor and council is to call on May 15th an internal audit. So the township, the residents will know where and how solvent the city is.
Okay, if you go to the back table, you're going to see a nice picture my wife took of me. But on the back of this little bio is 10 points that all list the savings and the way we can cut. Now, what we're doing in Montclair's government the last 4 years is not what Mayor Jackson did previous to that. Mayor Jackson, Councilor Baskerville, myself, we served together. We saved a lot of money. We reduced the debt. We reduced the cost of the government. But in the last 3.5 to 4 years, that's actually 4 years now, we've had a mayor who is on a spending binge with political appointments and favoritism. So I'm going to tell you the truth, which is what I keep telling people at the council meetings. You don't need to have a town manager consultant be paid $210,000 to work 3 days a week, now 5 days a week. You don't need him to have a deputy manager who is sitting there being underutilized when he could actually have been the one who was appointed as director of, listen to this, the Public Works or Community Services Department, it's called. We just hired a gentleman who was fired and left the towns in Bergen County where he worked, and we're giving him $186,000 when Brian Scantlebury could have been put in charge of that right now and paid the same salary he's making. Then we don't need to have another department created, which we never had before, which is called the Department of Administration. Now, I don't care that we have a wonderful person heading that department. We should not be spending another $150,000 for that new created department. We should also not be spending money on a public relations or public information person that really doesn't get out there and give the public information like we've been talking about communications. Then we cannot take $300,000 from the federal and state level for a anti-hate crimes grant, and I brought this up for 2 years now since Mayor Spiller had a big press conference and said he was going to appoint 15 people to the task force, and then have the $300,000 lay there and expire, and we had to request them to extend it. We could have lost the whole $300,000, which we haven't, but I've been trying to get them to appoint the people that the mayor promised 2 years ago in a press conference, which was just a political press conference. That the savings that we can get from all these areas, I've added up to $1 million, and I've said that that money should have gone to the schools when we were going to lay off teachers about a year or two ago. Now, let me just focus on that for just a second, because what we need to do is take this pilot money that is being paid by a number of developers and buildings and shift the pilot money where there's 160 students from those buildings, equivalent to $3 million, shift the pilot money to the schools so our town has a full-funded school system. All right, my time is up. Look in the back and see my list of all the savings and the ways we can make this town government work better.
Yeah, we said 3 people wanted.
I'm going to be very quick on this. To answer your question, I'm just going to have to look at this as a business owner and an entrepreneur. My feeling here is I think before we talk about cuts or paying for things, that we really, as everybody else has mentioned here this evening, is to address what we're already spending and assessing the budget and sharing it as your council person with my ward. Because every ward is going to have different needs that are going to need to be addressed. But as I say, as a business owner, if I have a customer and I'm selling them something that they don't want, it doesn't have any value. So cutting something that my ward needs and then another ward wants isn't going to help. So I think that in all fairness, for us not being on the council and getting great advice from Russo and Dr. Baskerville, is to give us an opportunity to assess what's going on here. These questions come about and they're very blanketed, but we really genuinely cannot answer that fairly without assessing what's going on first. But, and I'm going to finish this very quickly, what I would spend money on moving forward is making sure that we're dealing with environmental issues and becoming more economically friendly. So before we go and get the jitneys and before we do any of all of those things, and we have to then switch those back into electronic vehicles, we really need to kind of take a look at the EVPs, how many we need in the area, if we're going to deal with traffic and people driving their cars and vehicles. There's a lot of expense that we're going to need to address that's not even on the books yet. So just allow us an opportunity, whoever gets in, to give us a chance to really see what's going on and then be able to effectively speak with our wards properly.
Roddy wants 20 seconds.
Just really quickly. I was kind of like thinking to myself, and I'm like, just think about all of the outside council fees we pay, like low-hanging fruit, right? Outside consultants, right? You think about pilot programs, like inevitably there's going to be a negotiation for pilot agreement on Lackawanna. Like, let's not pass up revenue opportunities when they do present themselves and take advantage of them. And when we do make concessions, let's make sure that the townspeople get something of quantifiable value in return for those things.
Mr. Hansel, I'm sorry. I was so focused on trying to answer your question that I actually did want to just clarify something, because now 2 people have brought up the grant for the Anti-Hate Crimes Task Force. I was actually the person who raised it in a council meeting and to the council and the town manager. And so it actually was it is a federal grant that was awarded to Montclair Township, submitted on behalf of the police department. The purpose was to prevent and address hate crimes and bias incidents. And this is something that I felt was very important because, I know whether it's in schools or just out in public or, in the community, I thought that this was something that we should actually follow through on. So it was a federal grant. It was $300,000. We did get the grant. And the last information that I got from the town manager was that the budget had to be redone because the original budget included personnel costs, and they couldn't do that. So the current status is that it is with the DOJ, and they're waiting to hear back. And hopefully, I think in the process, hopefully we'll be able to make use of that money before September 2024. So, sorry.
I will just say, and I've said this publicly at town council meetings, I think when you're looking at a budget, you often start with the biggest cost driver in your budget to look for efficiencies. In our town, in the Montclair budget, the public safety budget is just the biggest cost driver in our budget. And I think if you look at the history of Montclair, and it really is a marvelous, unique history, the leaders of Montclair throughout the history were very careful to balance spending on public safety with spending on all of the other things that we look at and appreciate so much in this town. And that includes infrastructure. Especially at the early part of the last century, in the early 1900s, there was tremendous infrastructure growth in this town. And it was in about 1914 when they decided to professionalize the fire department. And at that time, the budget for police and fire department was each $50,000. In 2024 dollars, that would be $1.5 million each. Instead, we know that personnel costs have just grown enormously. Our public safety budget just for personnel is $41 million a year. The entire town of Westfield, New Jersey, all of their staffing is $28 million. And so people interpret this when I say this as that I want to volunteer fire department. And let me just say very clearly, my father was a New York City police officer. He was also a volunteer firefighter. In 1973, he was awarded Firefighter of the Year in Rockland County, which still has an entirely volunteer fire department. But I used to read that news clip that he ran into a burning building, scooped up a woman named Clara, ran her out, and as they ran out, he ran in without his own personal protective equipment, and the roof collapsed right after they got out. I used to read that as a child thinking, wow, my dad is a hero. And today I look at that and think, pardon my French, what was he thinking, and what would have happened to my family if something had happened to him? I do not believe people who run into burning buildings should be unpaid. But many people in New Jersey do believe that, right across the border in Verona and Cedar Grove. And to be blunt, we are competing with those people for other things, like our teachers, which they poach, our lifeguards, our crossing guards, our administration. And to Ilmar, the point that Ilmar made earlier, we have a lot of pent-up infrastructure needs in this town. And I think we need to be able to look with an open mind at all aspects of our budget and not make assumptions based on what we've been doing in the past. Thank you.
Got more questions? Please. Are you?
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is William Scott, 74-year resident of Montclair. I'd like to know what the next administration will do to really stand up all the wonderful volunteer organizations that have been in the township for decades, that have been resources, eyes and ears to past administrations, the appointment process, taking the politics out of appointing people that dedicate so much of their personal time to make Montclair a better place to live.
I need to answer this right off the bat. Mr. Scott knows that the town council was spending months and months delaying his own reappointment to the Housing Commission. Now, I got up to the podium, as I always do, and I said, I make a motion to appoint Mr. Scott. What were they going to say, the other 6? They had to go along with it, so it got done, right, Bill? The problem with this council is they stalled and stalled on appointments for months and months on so many commissions, especially the senior citizen group we had 2 years ago that all quit because they were being delayed and delayed on their appointments. Even one council member said, oh, we need new blood. You don't say that to me, a 75-year-old senior, or any seniors on a committee. And then you have Carolyn Lack, 95 years old, God bless you, Carolyn, comes up to speak, and the mayor tells her 2 minutes is enough, and makes her wait 2 hours to speak. And I turned to the mayor and I said, let her speak. She may not have that much more time. We hope she's going to be here, but he didn't want to let her speak. So we've had this problem. Now, the mayor recently, and I hate to do this, but you got to hear this, took Carmel Loughman off the planning board after 8 great years of service on the planning board, whether you agree or disagree, takes her off, turns to me, and this is in the closed session, so arrest me, okay? The closed session. He says, yes, I'm taking her off. We're going to put 2 people that are on the library board. He takes 2 people from the library board who he says were doing a good job. Well, then leave them there. Leave them on the library board. He takes those 2 people, which are political allies of his, and he puts them on the planning board and takes off Anthony Inuali, who was also there for a decade, another great local resident who's an architect and knows things about planning. He puts 2 new people on, and they railroaded through with me and Councilman Cummings opposing what they did. So you get the 5-2 vote, or sometimes it's 6-1. And I'm very proud I stood up for those people who are volunteers on those boards that get paid nothing, but the mayor uses it as a political tool.
I couldn't agree more with the previous comments because I speak as someone who was appointed to the library board for 4 years by Mayor Robert Jackson, and I did not support his candidacy. I worked for an opposing slate, yet he appointed me anyway because he knew of my dedication and that I was an appropriate and productive fit for the role. And that should be the only criteria that's factored in. Politics should stay out of it. And I think under the last 4 years, it's become highly politicized. I know of at least 2, maybe 3 library board positions that were vacant for over a year. It was brought directly to the mayor and council's attention, and no action was taken to fill them. I also know the Historic Preservation Commission, which I have been nominated for and attempted to be placed on for years now. 2 of the mayor's appointments quit after 3 or 4 months because they said the meetings were too long and time-consuming, and they couldn't sit through the duration. So why not originally, in the first place, appoint people who are ready to stand up and capable of committing the time and making the commitment? Ultimately, I think that what this does, leaving boards and committees short of people, it does a disservice to the residents of the community because those boards and bodies are not working at full optimal capacity. So again, to Mr. Scott's question, I'm glad he asked it. If I am on the council, I want to see a calendar of board appointments created that's flagged automatically 30, 40, 60 days in advance to notify people when action has to be taken so that no vacancies are overlooked anymore, whether deliberately or by unintentionally. That's what I want.
I just wanted to address the politicalization of our advisory boards. And I will use the planning board as an example. When I came on the planning board 8 years ago, there were 5 professionals, engineers, developers, architects. And now the planning board has 1 engineer. Other than that, they're very good people, but they're not technical people. And we're coming into a season where we're going to have a Lackawanna Plaza looked at. We're going to have maybe other large developments on Bloomfield Avenue looked at. We're going to have the possibility of a historic landmark being designated for Label Street. So we need people, though, who have a technical background. And I don't understand why our council, who really should be for the people, wouldn't want the best technical people on a zoning board, on a planning board. And they certainly have people who are interested in serving. So I fault them for that, and I hate the politicalization of our boards and commissions.
Yes. My name is Wendy McNeil, and I've lived in town now going on 40 years. And I've been on the Montclair Housing Commission. I served as the chair of the Housing Commission for 4 years and rotated off for a while, and now I'm back on. So when I first came on, it was the first generation of the Housing Commission, and that started under Ed Rumson. And when we began as a group, we came up with the inclusionary zoning ordinance. And at that time, the Housing Commission said that they wanted it to be 35% of all new developments would go for affordable housing. The council at that time, and that was Ed Rumson's council, came down and said up to 20%. It is very rarely done up because of the wording. It doesn't say 20%, it says up to. And usually it's only 10%. What I would like to know from the people who are running for the council is if you would insist, A, that it's 20%, or that you will revisit the inclusionary zoning ordinance and make it 35.
Wendy, I just would like to address that because there was an ordinance passed that it is now required to have 20% affordable housing in all new development. What happens, though, is that you have areas that are declared an area in need of redevelopment, and those areas don't have that requirement. So that is the percentage can be negotiated whichever way. For example, though, we're looking at Lackawanna Plaza, they have a requirement for 20% affordable housing plus 10% workforce housing. So it doesn't always go down. In that particular instance, it's going up. And it's not in place yet. Okay, just wanted to correct that.
Wendy, great name. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I would definitely advocate for as much affordable housing as we can get. And I myself, again, coming from a low-income family, we had Section 8. And I know how it is, my family knows how it is, to struggle to be able to stay somewhere where you want to live and that you love, right? I know how it is when a landlord raises the rent, right? It happened to me and my mom, where my landlord raised the rent by $300. And we could no longer stay in our home. So I completely understand and I hear the frustrations, the concerns, the valid concerns from all our residents. And I can tell you I am an advocate of affordable housing, and I will do everything in my power to be a constant voice in that cause.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for your question. Right now, Montclair is currently meeting its affordable housing. I am an advocate for it. Governor Murphy passed a new law just in March of this year where the numbers are going to change. So currently, we don't know what that number is going to be. What I will suggest is that if you're an advocate of affordable housing, to reach out to Janice Talley, who is actually drafting our master plan right now as we speak. It's the blueprint. This is the time where we can say things that we need or want for our town to be included into that master plan. If you don't have her email, I highly recommend going on the township website, sending her an email to ensure that adequate affordable housing goes into any future development. Thank you.
What do you want to add?
So yes, and Aminah, thank you, because I was going to talk about the A40 S50 legislation that was recently passed, also went through the Senate. And so because of that, the percentage of affordability will go now to the community affairs and assumably be taken away from us. But to answer your question, if it's an opportunity, and certainly I would love to look into it. And I wasn't aware about the 35%. That happened before I came in, and I've been at it for a long time. So that just after Remsen, when we thought, wow, 20%, and we fought really hard for that. If 35% is an option, I'm there with it. And the council will be able to make some of these decisions, especially when it's an area in need of redevelopment with some flexibility. So I would do that, and appreciate you for sharing that, because I wasn't aware about the 35%. Missed it.
Good afternoon. My name is Deirdre Malloy. A couple of comments and then a question. My first comment is if you're going to audit the budget, it should be a forensic audit. It should be a forensic audit on all departments. The next thing, I'm sorry, you had a question? Oh, okay. Okay. The next thing I wanted to say is with regard to the committees and commissions. I've been on the Housing Commission since 2011. I became the chair, and then I rolled off to become the chair of the Landlord Tenant Advisory Committee. Thank you. And you know, that's a lot of work. And with regard to what happens in those boards and commissions, you know, a lot of on-the-ground work happens, you know, for the constituents, and it rolls up to the council for the council to consider, be it rent control, be it ordinances and things of that nature. Typically, there is supposed to be a council liaison to these boards and commissions, and that hasn't happened in a long time. So my first question is, one, my term expires in 2025, so do several others, right? You'll have to do a new slate. There'll be an onslaught of new people applying. One, how quickly will you review the volunteer information forms to determine, as it was so appropriately said, the most appropriate people being, we're all experts in what we do, and we advise based off of our expert knowledge and what we do for a volunteer basis. So how quickly will you review the forms, and then how quickly will you set up the liaisons from the council to support the committees and to attend the committee meetings?
Thank you. I think that might be our last question, so we can have time to chat afterwards. But please, who would like to respond to that?
I'd really be interested in talking to you and Mr. Scott a little bit more about that. I just know that there do seem to be a lot of commissions and committees, and a lot of really talented people are serving or, you know, have served. They're all volunteer, and I think anyone who steps up to be willing to serve on it, like, deserves the time and attention, and certainly a quick response on appointments, and having somebody who's committed to working with the, you know, with the commission or committee. So I would be, you know, I would want to, you know, review those right away and figure out which ones I want to be a part of. I'm also very curious. I'm a little bit curious about the existing committees and commissions. Like, let's say, for example, I heard from a constituent about, or I'm sorry, a resident, not a constituent yet, but a resident about, like, for example, the arts. I think there's an arts advisory, arts council. And like, just as by way of example, this person sort of expressed frustration because they felt that, just as an example, that body wasn't really, they weren't really sure what their purpose was, and they're really, and how, you know, they weren't, I guess there's this perception that the council doesn't really take their advice seriously. So I am a little bit curious to know how these are set up and what the expectations are and what the commitments are, because they're very, you know, you all are very talented people. You're experts in your fields. We should be utilizing, you know, your time and expertise, and have your time and expertise and talents be worth your time, right? So anyway, that's just what I have to say about it for right now. Thanks.
Just to clarify it all, these commissions and committees and advisory boards, and sometimes, they're full boards like a Board of Ed, and they're all in different categories legally. But we've created all sorts of advisory boards over the years, which we don't take the advice from. So, for example, when the senior citizen leadership, I keep going back to this, not because I'm 75 and I don't look it, right? The point is that when the seniors came to this council to tell them to put a senior center at a particular location right across the street here, right? I was the only one who voted to proceed with that in 2000, exactly 2000, when we were elected. And the entire council voted against it. And years ago, Councilman Roger Terry right now had proposed that we buy what was called a senior services center over on Greenwood Avenue near Walnut. And the council then wouldn't spend the $1 million to buy a very large facility, which could have then been our senior center for the last 20 years. Now, I go down Ocean Grove a lot, and I'm active with the people in Neptune Township. They have a beautiful building on Route 33 in Neptune that was given to them by the county of Monmouth in exchange for another building. And they've got a fully functioning senior center with a director, with a staff, with activities, all there, lots of parking. We could have had that over on Greenwood, but that was knocked down by a council previous to mine. But Councilor Baskerville and I have worked for years to try to respond. She went to every meeting of these different boards. She always went to the advisory board meetings. I neglected to go to some, but Mayor Jackson set up a system where we'd have 3 liaisons for each commission or each advisory board, so at least one of us could go. That was an idea that Mayor Robert Jackson came up with, which is good. The last 3 years, I must say, it's the last 4 years now, these committees have not really even met. Like you're talking about the arts, I put 3 people on it that I know of. The great drummer in town, we've got a couple of good people. We've got the people who lead the premier dance, Shalise Wiggins. Put them on, but they're not meeting. And the liaisons don't get together with them. And here's where the real responsibility lies, with the clerk who now has a lifetime job. The clerk is supposed to give direction to these committees. Don't say, ooh, I know what I'm talking about. The clerk is supposed to give direction to the committees and have a schedule, to actually do, get them to meet. This is something we can't even get done. I'm the liaison, very active with the People with Disabilities Committee, a great committee of 15 good people. I had to fight to get them reappointed before the deadline. December 31st was when they would expire. What happened with the Senior Citizens Committee? Dragged out. Jimmy Eason, who's passed away now. We've got great people that were on that committee. They met every month. And then they quit. Why? Because the mayor and council did not reappoint them.
Thank you, Bob. To answer your question, Deirdre, are we ready? Thank you. I sit on the Landlord-Tenant Advisory Committee as a vice chair with Ms. Malloy, so I understand the struggle of ensuring that we get adequate people put on our commission. I think what I would do as a councilwoman is to ensure day one, similar to what my slate mate stated, 30, 60-day reports. You're right, Bob, it is the clerk that reviews the applications and gets them in, and we have to ensure that she supplies us with those applications ASAP. The other thing is we would have to partner with community members and make sure that we're matching applications that are applied with the resources and their needs. It's just that simple. I mean, it doesn't make sense to put someone on the housing committee if they have a background in environmental studies. So doing things like that would matter to help speed it up and make sure that these commissions are in place. I know that the HPC is currently down 2 people as we speak, and that's a very important commission in our town. 3, I'm sorry, thank you. So again, I don't know who's deciding who gets appointed at the moment and who's reviewing the applications, but I know when a new council comes in, if I'm in that seat, that would be one of my top priorities because I understand the work that goes into it. Thank you.
Hi, I would also like to reiterate that would also be one of my top priorities. I think it's so important to have advisory committees that we do take advice from, and also, again, as council members, right, help support that cause, have goals, action-oriented, results-oriented, similar to the Vision Zero task force that was just introduced, right? Let's get these great groups in the community and get some action and results done. And I would also like to mention, because I'm not sure if I am the only person running that's a renter, but I'm a renter. I think I saw a Ahava somewhere here, Ahava Felicidad. I see you all the time on video during the council meetings while I'm bathing and feeding my 4-year-old. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the work that you do. And I definitely, even now, would like to offer myself anywhere I can help with that, because also many renters don't know their rights. As I walk the streets campaigning, some renters have asked me, can I vote? And I said, absolutely, because they don't realize that they are also included in this equation, right? Homeowners, of course, let's do what we can for homeowners. Renters, absolutely. We are all part of this community, which is why I feel it's so important to have diverse perspectives, all kinds of diverse perspectives on the council. And that would be also my commitment.
Just very quickly, the abuse and disregard of these panels, I think, is extraordinarily important. It was actually, for me, my friend Ilmar's purging of the library board was something that radicalized me and put me on the path that I am now on. It is also something that I think it's good to end on, because we can be optimistic. Candidates often say on day one, I'm going to do this stuff and everything is going to change. And that's a lie, usually. In this one case, we can really say that we can change things on the first day. And out of these 15 people, including the one that I'm running against in the first ward, I have high confidence that we will have a council that will act differently about at least this one very important part of our work.
I think this boils down to 3 words: oversight, accountability, and proactiveness. Again, quoting from my 3-hour meeting with our township manager, I was astonished to learn, and I asked multiple times about practices and mechanisms and processes for employee evaluation and progress reports. And I was astonished to hear that hasn't been done in years at 205 Claremont. Not months, but for years. I was promised a physical hard copy of an employee performance review sheet. I have yet to receive it. If there is that little oversight at 205 Claremont, is it any surprise that it extends over to the council side? The clerk was mentioned as someone with direct responsibility for coordinating these placements. It seems nobody is accountable to anybody else, and nobody is performing oversight of anybody else at 205 Claremont or the current council, unfortunately. These things, to me, are things that the council should be proactive on, not reactive, not waiting for someone to come up to them and say, this position has been vacant for 6 months, or this position has been vacant for a year. We should anticipate these openings and take preventative, proactive steps, as I said, putting together an electronic calendar that automatically flags, notifies 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months out that a vacancy is coming up, so appropriate procedures can be undertaken, including prospecting for candidates, interviewing appropriate candidates, and hopefully filling the vacancy before the deadline, not after it. So to me, it goes without saying that this should be done. Every candidate should promise and pledge, if elected, they are going to accept responsibility and provide oversight for all of the functions that the council performs. It's that simple.
Sorry. Ilmar is right. It really is that simple. And some of the answers that I've heard are actually a little alarming, because people need to do the job and they need to know what the job that they're doing is. And someone said, well, I was looking for a organizational chart for 205 Claremont. Well, the employee handbook I have is from 2004. And it doesn't have any of the right rules about discrimination or what kind of courses are required or anything like that. The accountability, as Ilmar said, is lacking. The proactiveness of some people is also alarming. Bob knows a lot about what's going on. He's done his best. It's very hard to be so frustrated in front of so many people and trying to take on the weight of all of the people that he represents. I understand that is true of everybody up there, but some people earn the respect and some people say, I deserve it. You need to not talk to me that way. I don't think it's rude to state facts. I think that people have to take responsibility for their actions. And I think that a lot of the issues that are brought up, Ms. Malloy, I've spoken to several times, I think it's abominable that we have councils that we don't listen to. We have groups that we just ignore. And the council is allowed to do that within parameters. But if we do, I don't know what a better word for stupid, if we do stupid stuff, we're gonna get bad results. And if we keep doing them for years and years and years, then we're gonna have to look at the budget and we're gonna have to make cuts because our taxes are not gonna go up. They're too high already. And we have to worry about whether what we're doing is not just environmentally sustainable, but fiscally sustainable. Because if we have to pay people's pensions and they're getting them the day before they announce their resignation, that's a problem for all of us. And all of these new hires that are happening now are things that we're going to have to deal with. It doesn't mean that it's absolutely, set in stone that the clerk has tenure. You're still responsible for performance. We just have to state the accountability standards, set them forth, and then make the department heads show us what they're doing. If there are counselors that are supposed to be at meetings but aren't, we need to know why. And the way to resolve it is community involvement at all stages. We're your government. We serve you. If you elect us, that's the job.
Hi, Ms. Malone. Excellent question. I can't imagine why we wouldn't have an advisory board that's not paying attention and not being proactive. I mean, one, the council takes on a lot of responsibility in and of itself. So if you assign people to handle a situation, I think that one, we should again, and I am breaking this into wards, is assign a council person that addresses, for example, housing with the fourth ward being 75% of all affordable housing. You should have that person, the council, choose the person that speaks on the advisory boards, and then they can communicate with each other. Because that's how you talk about things, and that's how you get things done. I mean, as a business person in itself, I can say I have a director, I have people that are working within the confines of my business to make it work. Ignoring that, or not doing your job in that area, can be detrimental to the council as well as the town as a whole. So essentially what I'm saying is that we should appoint people to an advisory board, particularly housing, that is familiar with housing, and then make sure that they're following up with committee meetings within their particular ward. Thank you.
Just really quickly, a point of clarity. The Housing Commission and the Landlord Tenant Advisory Committee meet all the time. Yes. We work, and the Landlord Tenant Advisory Committee works lockstep with the police department, the water bureau, the town manager. There's no lack in accountability.
I say this lack is on our side.
Yeah,
it's on the,
you said something
side.
a little
I'm
different.
Sorry, I apologize.
And
I was
so
saying the lack
we're very
is on our side,
effective.
Following through.
Thank you.
I definitely agree with that. Thank you, Ms. Malloy.
Yes.
And I will just quickly say, I think that we could structure our council meetings a little bit differently to be able to highlight the members of the community who are doing so much important work. Because I think we're all volunteers, we're all, committed to public service. And I think if we can lift up as an agenda item, what is the status of committees, how many openings are there, and then a standing agenda item would be, let's hear from a committee, a citizen committee. We've heard a lot about Clary Anderson at Town Council in the last few months. What is the Recreation Committee? What is the Parks, what are they discussing in terms of all of these issues? And I think we can use technology. We can have people zooming in more, so that maybe if they can't make it to the meeting themselves, they can be zooming in. And so I think we can use the meeting itself as a real, has a real potential, I think, to be more open and more transparent and lift up the really important work that you're all doing.
Well, thank you all. This is 2 hours of democracy in action. Thank you for being such fantastic voters. Thank you for the council. Thank you. Liz, thank you. Georgette, thank you.